Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine.
I'm Philip Emeagwali. I began supercomputing on June 20, 1974 at age 19 in Corvallis, Oregon, United States. Back in the 1970s and 80s, the core technology that drives both the modern computer and the massively parallel processing supercomputer of today and drives them at their fastest speeds was ridiculed, mocked, and rejected in scientific research. A scientist that discovered something new that other scientists did not know asserts his or her authority over his or her discovery, and do so by authoring an in-depth research report on his or her discovery and then giving a companion series of lectures that are shared with everybody in the world, including those on YouTube. My series of lectures on my contributions to the development of the modern supercomputer are posted at youtube.com/Emeagwali. The vector processing supercomputer scientist of the 1980s that I asked to review my 1,057-page research report on the new massively parallel processing supercomputer that I was programming ridiculed, mocked, and rejected my experimental discoveries and inventions. In late 1989, when my experimental discovery won the top prize in the field of supercomputing and began to make the news headlines across major US newspapers, those supercomputer scientists that ridiculed, mocked, and rejected my research report confessed to news journalists that they threw my 1,057-page supercomputer research report into the trash. After my experimental discovery of the massively parallel processing supercomputer that occurred on the 4th of July 1989, those supercomputer scientists that ridiculed, mocked, and rejected my discovery of the precursor of the modern supercomputer realized that the history of the supercomputer is unfolding right before their eyes, and that they were not a part of the story of the development of the modern supercomputer. In 1989, and after I won the top prize in supercomputing, those supercomputer scientists that ridiculed, mocked, and rejected my experimental discovery of parallel processing became envious of my new fame and ran back to me to beg for a second copy of my 1,057-page supercomputer research report that they previously threw into the trash. The news headlines described me as the African supercomputer wizard, and did so because my experimental discovery of the massively parallel processing supercomputer that occurred across a new internet, that is a new global network of 65,536 tightly coupled commonly available processors, and that occurred on the 4th of July 1989 was described as the wizardry act of making the previously impossible to compute possible to compute. What was erroneously written in the supercomputer textbooks of the 1940s through 80s was that it will forever remain impossible to harness the potential power of parallel processing. The June 14, 1976 issue of the Computer World magazine interviewed supercomputer experts that were attending the 1976 National Computer Conference in New York City. Those supercomputer experts were asked if it will ever be possible to invent how to use parallel processing, or how to use an ensemble of thousands of processors, and how to use them to execute the fastest computations across that ensemble. The unanimous opinion of those supercomputer scientists was summed up in an article in the June 14, 1976 issue of the Computer World magazine. E. Drake Lundell Jr., who was the computer industry editor for the Computer World magazine, wrote an article titled, quote, "Research in Parallel Processing, questioned as waste of time," unquote. Looking back retrospectively, the reason I was not discouraged from massively parallel processing across an ensemble of 65,536 processors was that I was then only 21 years old, and therefore I had the years to waste. It seemed like I was wasting 15 years onward of age 19, and wasting that prime decade and a half pursuing parallel processing that then seemed impossible. I spent the 13 years onward of 1976 conducting my supercomputer research and researching as a lone wolf at supercomputer centers that were across the United States. In the 1970s and 80s, I had a presence in US supercomputer centers. I programmed supercomputers in Corvallis, Oregon. I programmed supercomputers in Pasadena, California. I programmed supercomputers in Chicago, Illinois. I programmed supercomputers for 16 years, and I was the first person to be referred to as a supercomputer scientist. As an extreme scale computational physicist at the frontier of the supercomputer, my research focus was on how to invent a massively parallel processing supercomputer that I defined and outlined by a new ensemble of 65,536 tightly coupled commodity off-the-shelf processors, and how to invent, how to reduce 180 computing years on only one processor that is solving the toughest problem in extreme scale computational physics to just one supercomputing day across my new internet that is a new global network of 65,536 tightly coupled processors that are harnessed to solve the same initial boundary value problem in modern calculus and or mathematical physics.
insightful and brilliant lecture.